This week, Becky was the guest on something called A Touch More. I know this sounds like a show that's exclusive to OnlyFans, but A Touch More is a podcast hosted by the Sue Bird and the inspiration of prepubescent boys, Meg Rapinoe. They were talking to Rebecca Lobo about the unreasonable demands made by
That voice you just heard was Rebecca Lobo, one of the WNBA's original stars from 1997 and now an ESPN commentator. And what she just said should alarm every player in the league. Fan support for WNBA players is slipping fast amid the CBA negotiations. But what makes this particularly shocking is where she said it, on Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe's podcast. This wasn't a random opinion on a sports debate show. It was a league legend speaking on a platform hosted by WNBA royalty, telling them that the players are mishandling the situation. So, what exactly have these players done to lose the support they were supposed to have?
Criticized WNBA players for their inability of maintaining support from the fan base. You had the fans' support. All you had to do was shut the hell up. Instead, you displayed your unbelievable entitlement by calling million-dollar annual salaries a slap in the face. When I played in this dump, we were playing for prizes, free scooters, tricycles, just for men, and you have the audacity to complain about receiving $1 million you haven't earned?
Watch it again. Rebecca Lobo is openly condemning current WNBA players for the way they're handling the CBA talks. She's arguing that they already had fan goodwill, and all they needed to do was stay silent. Instead, they showed what she describes as shocking entitlement by labeling million-dollar paychecks as an insult. Keep in mind, this is coming from someone who competed for prizes and free scooters back in the late 90s. But this criticism points to something far bigger than just wounded feelings over salary complaints. It reveals a major shift in the balance of power between the league and its athletes happening right now.
Combat. It was a seminal moment for a number of reasons. This contract, it shaped the future of the business, but it also changed the mindset. It changed the mentality of Vince McMahon. With Bret Hart, it was one of the first times that a star talent had more leverage than the company. It was the first time that Vince McMahon felt powerless in negotiations. He made a promise to himself to never be put in that situation again. He would never allow one of the employees.
That Bret Hart comparison matters more than it first appears. In the late 90s, Vince McMahon signed Bret Hart to a groundbreaking WWF contract worth millions, money that had never been seen in wrestling before. But the bigger significance was that it marked the first time a performer held more leverage than the company. McMahon felt helpless during those negotiations, and he made himself a promise. He would never again allow any employee to wield more influence than the brand. He would never let one star outgrow the WWF. Right now, Kathy Engelbert is facing that exact same turning point. For the first time in WNBA history, players believe they hold real power. They think the Caitlin Clark ratings surge, and the rise of leagues like Unrivaled give them bargaining strength. Their belief is the only thing that matters to them, even if it's completely disconnected from the facts. And just like McMahon in 1997, Engelbert is making moves to ensure this situation never repeats.
Media watch. WNBA pushing earlier start and later finish to the pretend basketball season. When I initially saw this headline the other day, I was confused. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't remember anyone asking for more pretend basketball. I don't remember seeing this insatiable demand, this unquenchable desire for more women's basketball. Matter of fact, If you look at ratings and attendance for Unrivaled, or the fact that absolutely no one is talking about women's college basketball, or the fact that the WNBA Finals struggled to sell tickets with tickets going for less.
This is the real power move. The WNBA is pushing to extend the regular season from 44 games to 54, an extra 10 games. Training camp would begin in March, and the WNBA Finals would end in November. At first glance, it looks like the league is simply trying to boost revenue. More games mean more ticket sales, more broadcast opportunities, and more sponsorship deals. But if you examine the calendar, this change is about something else entirely: control. If the plan is approved, WNBA players would have no break between the Unrivaled season and WNBA training camp. They would essentially be playing year-round, with no chance to compete overseas. The league already enforces prioritization rules that penalize players who miss training camp to play elsewhere. This new schedule would force athletes into an impossible decision: play exclusively in the WNBA or play in overseas and unrivaled leagues, but no longer both.
4 games to a maximum of 54 games. This would give WNBA players 10 more opportunities to prove they can't sell tickets. But I don't think this is about money. Or in the case of the WNBA, I don't think this is about increasing the amount of the money that they are losing. This schedule is about power. It's about control, leverage. The league wants training camp to start in March, with the WNBA Finals, also known as the Chase for the Platinum Pooper, concluding in November.
This is a masterstroke from Kathy Engelbert. She isn't bargaining. She's reminding players who holds the real leverage. For years, WNBA athletes have been living in a fantasy. They've convinced themselves they're on par with NBA players. They believe they're bigger than the league itself. They act like employees who are more powerful than their employer. But the wake-up call is coming. WNBA players are entry-level workers, an added benefit, not the core necessity. Entry-level staff are hired when businesses are doing well to support the main revenue generators. When budgets tighten, those entry-level roles are the first to be cut, not out of cruelty, but because the company can continue operating without them.
Unrivaled is already doing a phenomenal job of putting themselves out of business, but with this new schedule, overpaid players in Unrivaled, they would have no break between the Unrivaled season and the WNBA season. This proposal, it essentially forces WNBA players into making a choice. Due to prioritization, the WNBA penalizes players who don't show.
Consider what would happen if WNBA players walked off the job right now. Fans wouldn't be outraged because WNBA viewership is mostly tied to the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. NBA owners wouldn't lose sleep either, since the WNBA loses money every year. In fact, they would actually reduce expenses if the players stopped playing. That's not bargaining power. It's the exact opposite. Contrast that with the NBA. If NBA players threatened a strike, the league would scramble because billions in revenue would disappear overnight. TV partners would demand refunds. Sponsors would pull out. NBA owners would agree to nearly anything to prevent that outcome. But with the WNBA, a strike would feel like a paid holiday for everyone involved.
Employees think they are more powerful than the employer, when the reality is WNBA players are the equivalent of entry-level employees. Entry-level workers, they're a bonus. Entry-level workers are hired when the company is thriving to assist those who are actually generating the revenue. But when times get tough, when management slashes the budget, the entry-level workers, they are the first to.
What makes this so intriguing is the illusion of leverage. WNBA players truly believe they hold power right now. Attendance climbed from almost nothing to slightly less than nothing, and they interpret that as a mandate. Ratings rose because one player, Caitlin Clark, became a cultural sensation, and suddenly everyone assumes they deserve NBA-level pay. With overseas leagues and unrivaled offering contracts, players believe they have alternatives. But it's all smoke and mirrors. None of that converts into real bargaining power when your employer is the one funding your entire existence.
This leverage that WNBA players think they have, this leverage is an illusion. The increased ratings, attendance going from nothing to almost nothing, secondary dumps like Unrivaled and Project B, this gave WNBA players the illusion of leverage. If you took this same situation and you applied it to the NBA, the league would be in trouble. NBA players would get whatever the hell they wanted, but with the WNBA, the same leverage does not apply because this league isn't a necessity. It's a bonus. It's a nice tax write-off for the NBA. But if it goes away, they'll just find another way to ease their tax burden. The way it looks right now, if WNBA players want their $1 million annual contracts, if they want to be paid what they deserve, they're going to have to make some.
Here's what this new schedule proposal really accomplishes. If WNBA players want their $1 million contracts, salaries they're calling a slap in the face despite not generating the revenue to justify them, they're going to have to make concessions. And the main concession is this. Unrivaled goes out of business. Think about the business model of Unrivaled. It's a 3-on-3 league that plays during the WNBA offseason from January through March. They pay players 6 figures for 8 weeks of work. The entire concept depends on access to WNBA talent during the winter months, when those players would otherwise be overseas. But if the WNBA season now runs from March through November, Unrivaled loses its entire talent pool. Players can't compete in both leagues anymore without violating prioritization rules and risking their WNBA salary. Nneka Collier and Breanna Stewart founded Unrivaled specifically to give players a domestic option in the offseason. They raised millions in funding. They secured broadcast deals. They convinced 30 players to buy in. And now the WNBA is about to make their entire business model impossible. This isn't accidental. This is Kathy Engelbert systematically eliminating any alternative that could give players leverage in future negotiations. Rebecca Lobo's comments on that podcast reveal how the old guard sees the situation. She played when salaries were embarrassingly low, when players competed for prizes instead of paychecks. And from her perspective, current players are ungrateful for. But what's really happening here isn't about gratitude or entitlement. It's about power. It's about whether employees can dictate terms to their employer. And in this case, the answer is becoming painfully clear. The WNBA is not a necessity. It's a tax write-off. It's a nice gesture toward gender equity. It's a way for NBA owners to show social responsibility. But if it disappeared tomorrow, the NBA would simply find another charitable cause to fund. That's not true for the players. Without the WNBA, most of these athletes have nowhere else to go. Overseas leagues don't pay enough to sustain careers. Unrivaled can't survive without the WNBA offseason window. And there is no other domestic professional league. When players threaten to opt out of the CBA or demand 50% revenue sharing like NBA players get, they're negotiating from a position of complete weakness. They're pretending to have leverage they don't actually possess. And the league knows that that's why this schedule proposal isn't really a proposal at all. It's an ultimatum. Play by our rules, accept our terms, and stop pretending you have other options, because we're about to eliminate those options entirely. The comparison to Vince McMahon and Bret Hart keeps coming back because it's so precise. McMahon learned in 1997 that allowing talent to become more powerful than the brand creates an unsustainable business model that he spent the next 25 years ensuring no. He built the WWE brand to be bigger than any individual performer. And when stars left for competing promotions, WWE didn't collapse. It survived because the company was the draw, not the talent. Kathy Engelbert is doing the exact same thing right now, that she's making sure the WNBA brand, weak as it is, remains more important than any individual player. Even Caitlin Clark, who generated the vast majority of the league's increased attention this season, doesn't have enough power to dictate terms. Because if Clark walked away tomorrow, the WNBA would still exist, IT would go back to empty arenas and minimal TV audiences, but it would survive. The NBA would keep funding it for PR purposes. The league would continue operating at a loss like it has for 27 years. That's the reality WNBA players are refusing to accept. They saw one season of higher ratings and sold-out arenas and convinced themselves everything had changed. They thought they finally had leverage. They believed this was their moment to demand NBA-level treatment, but they misread the situation entirely. The ratings bump, it wasn't a league-wide revolution. It was almost entirely one player. The attendance spike, it was concentrated around a handful of games featuring that same player. The rest of the league remained largely invisible to mainstream sports fans. And now the bill is coming due. The players did what they always do when they feel like the spotlight has finally turned their way. They demanded maximum salaries over $1 million, that they called anything less than that a slap in the face. They compared themselves to NBA players despite generating a fraction of the revenue they acted entitled to money they hadn't earned. And in doing so, they handed Kathy Engelbert all the ammunition she needed to put them back in their place. This new schedule proposal will likely pass. Players will complain publicly. Some will threaten to sit out. Some will threaten to play overseas full-time. But ultimately, they'll accept it because they have no other choice. Unrivaled will either fold or pivot to a completely different. Overseas leagues will keep offering modest pay to American athletes who fail to secure a WNBA roster spot. And the balance of power will revert to its usual state, with the league controlling everything and players thankful just to have a job. Rebecca Lobo's comments on that podcast were essentially a warning from the old guard. She was telling today's players they were handling things the wrong way. They enjoyed public support, or at least public indifference, which is almost the same thing. All they had to do was accept fair raises and stay quiet. Instead, they aired complaints about million-dollar offers, acted like victims even though they are backed by a more profitable league, and squandered whatever good they once had. So what happens next? The WNBA will expand its season. Players will be forced to choose between playing domestically year-round or continuing to earn extra money overseas. Unrivaled will probably fold within 2 years, and the next CBA talks will occur with players holding even less leverage than now. Because when you bluff with a weak hand, you don't just lose the current negotiation, you destroy your credibility for every future one. That the real loss isn't that WNBA players won't receive NBA-level pay. They never were going to, because their revenue simply doesn't match the NBA.